Everyone gets to stir the pot. That is one of the opening sentences from a new cookbook called The Anti-Racist Kitchen, 21 Stories and Recipes. It is a call for equality at the table, but it's also an invitation for readers, young and old, to look at the acts of cooking through a social justice lens. The book brings together Black, Indigenous, and other racialized authors to share their foods and cultures and explores how these celebrations are and can be acts of change or even resistance. Editor and author Nadia Hahn joins me now to talk about this project. Hello, Nadia.
Hello.
Tell us, what does this idea of an anti-racist kitchen mean to you?
Well, it's a place where you make delicious food, first and foremost. It's also a safe and welcome space where people can gather and have courageous conversations and feel heard, and that everyone feels nourished and feels like, okay, we all have a part to play, and we all are going to hold space for everybody. So the racialized folks who've experienced racism, who have history, and folks that are on the other side can also be a part of the conversation and feel involved in creating of a space for courageous conversation.
Sounds like nourishment of not just the body, but of the mind here with some of these discussions that you're talking about.
Definitely.
So what inspired you to put this collection of stories and recipes together and to create this?
Well, first and foremost, I love to eat. I am a foodie. I love to cook. And as you know, I'm a writer. So I knew at some point one day my dream was to actually write a cookbook. I often take pictures of my food, and I love that I cook, and I love to share food with others. And I began to think of also the need for a album to celebrate all of these diverse authors that are now having traditionally published books in Canada. I wanted to have a space to do that. So that was in my mind, and I started putting a draft of kind of a proposal together. And then, of course, we were in 2020 spring, and a racial justice movement was happening. George Floyd, it basically kicked off and created a racial justice movement across the world. There were increased incidents of anti-Black racism and anti-Asian hate and Islamophobia. And, of course, there was the discovery of the mass graves of Indigenous children. And many communities it was a very difficult time. So I saw the need, the book had to change, so around 2020, I started thinking about the book in a different way. So I also am a teacher, and I work with children. I do have an equity lens. I bring diversity into the classroom, especially my students are from many backgrounds. Sometimes we cook together. And I was teaching grade 8 once, and I asked my students, my language arts students, how many of you have read a book by someone who looks like you? And very, very few, if any, students put up their hands. So I really wanted children to read a book that they felt seen in. I also want my colleagues, my teacher colleagues who want to do anti-racist work to have an age-appropriate resource where they can start to do that, build community, have those courageous conversations in the classroom, and have the tools to do it. So that's where it all kind of came together, encapsulated in this one book.
Certainly it makes sense that all this was happening at the same time you were putting together this book, but can you maybe help us build this connection between cooking and anti-racism actions? How do you sort of meld them together in the book?
Well, there are different ways, and they're done through the stories of the contributors. And I have to say, like, the 21 contributors, they're amazing writers. So that was already there. I know they can communicate great stories. Some of them have actually already written books about food or that involve food, or have written books that talk about diversity or equity, or, just being proud of you're who you are, and I knew that when I approached the creators or the contributors, that's what I was thinking about, and I hope I answered your question. I feel like I'm missing that one piece.
Yeah, no, it certainly makes sense. You're talking about recipes interspersed with the sort of individual stories of the contributors. Was there one story that sort of stuck with you, Nadia, as you were putting this together, or one that resonates when we talk about this?
That's a toughie, but I will say that Wapkishik Rice's story about Manuman really stuck out to me. All of the stories are wonderful. This one stuck out to me because it was about reclaiming a name and a name that was changed. So Wabgeshig's family name was Manumin, and his ancestor had to change the name, anglicize it to rice. Manumin is an indigenous word for rice. So the fact that Wabgeshig carries that name, that colonized name, that rice, and now he and his wife are changing the name back for his children. So naturally, the recipe that he provided is actually wild rice with mushroom and corn. It's very delicious. I had some this week.
Oh, you actually tried it out.
Yeah, and the thing, and actually it was cooked by a school where I actually presented to the staff. So there are schools that are starting to use this book and engage with it. In this one school, they actually cooked a number of the dishes and shared it at their staff meeting. So I find that food actually is a vehicle. It can help people's defenses to come down, people to feel safe, nourished, and cared for. And I feel like it can help to create a safe space to have these conversations where we can talk about colonization and the impact of something like having your name changed, and how that has other impacts in other ways too.
We're having this conversation ahead of Thanksgiving weekend, when many people will be, of course, gathering, maybe sharing a meal together. Any advice for how folks can maybe have some of these discussions that we're talking about, if they so choose to, further with their family or loved ones?
I think that's a great question. And first of all, I say get the book. Get the book, and a lot of the recipes have their stories behind them. And also, as you're sitting with your family and you're eating food, maybe talk about where the food comes from, who gathers with the food, where do they come from. And, for example, a lot of the foods, the vegetables and fruits that we eat are gathered by people who come from South America, Central America, and the Caribbean. So you could talk about their experiences, try out their recipes, and read their stories in the book. You could also think about the first peoples of this land who are here and what their experiences are like today, and read some of their stories, like Wabgeshig's story, Dietrich Haverlock's story, Andrea Rogers' story as well. So I encourage that everyone to have conversations about the food, have conversations about how they're feeling and experiences they've had. And if someone's different from you and has had an incident of racism or experiences racism or sees that things are racist, let's have conversations. Let's not just take out that idea. Let's have conversation and see if we can have understanding of what's happening, and maybe we can come up with some ideas of what we can do to fix it.
All right, Nadia, we'll have to leave it there. Thanks for joining us on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Nadia Hahn is an author, educator, and editor of The Anti-Racist Kitchen, 21 Stories and Recipes.